Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hey everyone, I'm Julie Gunlock with the Independent Women's Forum and your host for today's Working for Women podcast. Today I'm here with my good friend, Jenn Jacques. She is the editor of Breach, Bang, Clear, which is an online news site that covers the Second Amendment and other gun rights issues. Jenn, thanks for joining us, or for me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, Jenn, you live in Wisconsin. You're also you have been writing about the Second Amendment for a long time. You just recently wrote a fantastic policy focus for the Independent Women's Forum, how the Second Amendment improves women's lives.
Thank you.
Tell me, first of all, before we get into the policy focus, tell us a little about this online news site that you're editing.
So I'm the editor-at-large at Breach, Bang, Clear, which was started by a couple of military buddies to put information out there about the industry, cover gear, policy issues, and just kind of give the people what they want. And they have been after me for a while, and I finally relented and took a position as editor-at-large. That's
great. Well, we are really thrilled to have you writing on these issues for us. I think that women are particularly interested in the Second Amendment, in gun rights. And I think in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, and goodness gracious, what happened yesterday with Matt Lauer,
right.
I think it's a very topical issue right now of how women can protect themselves, how carrying a firearm for your own protection is something that a lot of women want to do. Why do you think women sort of misunderstand the issue of the Second Amendment and gun rights? What kind of misinformation is out there on that issue?
Sure. Well, I'll be honest, Julie. I mean, the Second Amendment and gun rights and even guns and hunting were, by and large, a man's industry and a man's world. But going back about 10, 15 years, dads started bringing their daughters into the woods with them, and moms started talking to their sons and daughters about, personal protection, and the divorce rate started going up, and there were more single moms, and we kind of saw a shift in the industry. But for a long time, it's kind of like a monopoly on the conversation. You have Hollywood, you have organizations like Moms Demand Action, you have musical artists, and all of the information that's out there about guns and gun control is largely slanted against gun rights and the Second Amendment. But the sad thing about that is that women deserve to hear both sides of the issue, and that means listening to women like myself and you who know about guns, who are safe and know about gun safety, want to teach children how to be safe. And really, there isn't that, back and forth, the 50-50 conversation out there. So that's what I'm working to dispel.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those myths. And I want to tick down the myths that you address in the policy focus, which I think is really helpful because, if you listen certainly to trusted news people like Matt Lauer and some of these other guys. If you listen to them, you would. The first myth is that gun violence is on the rise in America. Is this true?
It is absolutely not true. Gun violence has been on the decline, and that is a good thing. We've seen this trend over the past decade that gun ownership goes up, and guess what? Crime goes down. That is a good thing. And I believe that the government should only do for the people what they cannot do for themselves. And speaking for myself, certainly living in rural northern Wisconsin, I mean, I've spoken to my local sheriff, and he has said, look, if your local township is on a call, hear how small that is, and the sheriff, is tied up, it could be a good 40 minutes before we could even get to your home. Now, I have 3 kids in the home. My husband is permanently disabled with brain damage. I want some way to defend myself.
Of course. Yeah. Well, that's another thing that they, so they lie. They say that gun violence is up. They say that crime is up. They say, and of course we need to continue to pursue policies that will continue to reduce the crime rate.
Absolutely.
But when you suggest that gun violence is somehow at the we live in a war zone, it's just insane. But that stokes people's fears, that makes people nervous. Yes.
Right, and they're just perpetuating that myth that if more people are buying guns, now I say buying guns, meaning buying them legally through the correct channels, that crime is going to go up. That is absolutely false.
Well, this is the other thing that you always hear about. And you hear it from these groups, right? Common sense gun laws. Common sense gun laws, right? That will make us safer. Let's talk a little bit about those common sense gun laws. For instance, the one there was a gun limits were I think they're the strictest gun limits were put in place in Maryland in 2013. Are people safer in Baltimore? Why don't you give us a sense of what's going on in Baltimore?
Well, Baltimore is a hot mess. I mean, Baltimore, Chicago, and
San Francisco.
Cities like this. Yeah, well, exactly. They like to tout we have the toughest gun laws. Well, okay, so let's look at those cities. They have the worst crime rate throughout the country, and yet
the highest gun crime rate. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And it's just sad because all it's doing is limiting law-abiding citizens' right to carry and defend themselves.
Yep.
So it's really making victims. It's fish in a barrel.
Well, when you hear about these crimes, and some sort of a gun crime, and you look at what occurred, many times they broke the law to get the. I mean, they didn't go through the legal way. I mean, it's insane to me because there are a ton of laws on the books, some of which are not enforced, and which is a large part of the problem. I mean, for instance, you had the situation. There was a shooting recently where I think it was the Air Force didn't report some sort of crime, and so again, if these laws had been enforced, but again, that doesn't mean we need new laws. We need to actually
now.
Enforce
Let me take that a
step
further.
Yeah.
Let me take that a step further, Julie. When Vice President Biden was asked to please prosecute individuals who lie and try, he said, we don't have the time or resources for that.
Right.
Now, that to me is a huge offense. Huge offense.
Right.
If you lie on a 4473, on an FFL application to purchase a firearm, just to try to get one, that is a punishable offense. That is breaking the law. And we had Vice President Biden say, no.
Well, and not only Vice President Biden, this is another myth I want you to address, is anyone can own a gun, right? President Obama famously freaked out the entire country in 2016 by actually tweeting, he actually tweeted this, quote, a violent felon can buy the exact same weapon over the internet with no background checks, no questions asked. Total lie.
That's an absolute lie. And I'll tell you, I'm in the media, so I receive guns from manufacturers so that I can test them and evaluate them and then write about them. But I still have to go to my local gun store, fill out a background check form, stand there and wait for however long it takes. And, here in Wisconsin, it used to be two days.
Right.
And it's absolute insanity. I actually get people on Twitter and Facebook saying, well, I'll just order a gun from Amazon and it'll be delivered to my door. That's not how it works. You still have to go in. And I mean, I had 5 guns come in from Walther for T&E, and I had to go 2 trips and I had to pay for 2 background checks because they came in 2 different shipments.
Yep.
And I'm a former private detective. I'm licensed with the state. Everybody has my fingerprints. I mean, there is no, number one, there's no preferential treatment. And number 2, no, not just anybody can buy a gun off the internet. And I'm sorry, the guns are not easier to buy than books either.
Well, look, and also Obama mentioned a violent felon can buy the exact same one. What is so irritating about that is because then he invokes the internet, over the internet with no background check. A violent felon, it has been illegal for a felon to own a gun since 1934, okay? In 1934, the National Firearms Act made it illegal for felons that were convicted of violent crime to own a gun.
That's right.
And then in 68, they expanded that, right? That it can be a non-violent felon. And anybody who's convicted of domestic violence, if you have been adjudicated as having a mental disorder, you can't. If you smoke marijuana, even medically, you can never own a gun.
Right.
I mean, these
right. And you know what? This is also what fires me up, because gun owners and the National Rifle Association have been pushing for years to have the government fix the background check that is so flawed. It works, but we have to fix it. That's it.
Yeah.
So if you have a car and it has a flat tire, do you say, oh, no, we need a tank. I have to go buy a tank. No, you don't need a tank. Fix the tire. You
don't need a whole new car. You need just a new tire. Yes, exactly. Well, I also want, we're both moms, and I think this is the last myth I really want to go over, because I think this is particularly interesting to moms. I actually had I live right outside of Washington, D.C., in the People's Republic of Alexandria. It is very liberal, and so I had a mother ask me, before she okayed a play date, asked me if I had guns in the home. There are some really scared people where I live about guns. They're very frightened and they're very misinformed. So let me ask you, is it dangerous to have guns around kids?
It's absolutely not dangerous to have guns around kids. I was raised around guns, and my children have been raised around guns. And if anything, it makes them so aware and hyper aware of the reality of what these tools are, that they're safe, and they are trying to make their friends and their schoolmates safe around guns. Just ignoring the fact that guns are out there doesn't do anything. I started talking to my kids about drugs when they were 2 years old. Alex, don't do drugs. Katie, don't ever smoke. I mean, I literally started it then. Did they need to know it then? I would say no, since I had a nanny and I worked from home. I mean, seriously. But same with firearms. I went to the NSSF and had Project Child Safe locks on my guns when my kids were too little to understand what they were. And then when they got older, I put them through the Eddie Eagle gun safety program so that they knew if you ever see a gun, you stop, don't touch, run away, and tell an adult. Now,
and that is the Eddie Eagle program is through the National Rifle Association, correct?
Correct, and they have trained more than 30 million children in America as to what to do if they ever come across a gun. And, sometimes the problem isn't that, I don't have a gun in my home, so my kids are fine. What happens if they go on a play date and there is a gun there and they know nothing about them except that they've seen them on Bugs Bunny or whatever it is, and they pick it up and pull the trigger? That's where I say kids in a home with firearms and responsible parents like ourselves are way safer around guns.
Well, listen, Jen, this has been great. The last thing I'd like you to talk about is that apparently gun ownership is on the rise in the United States, particularly among women. Tell me a little bit why you think this is, particularly when you have, Hollywood and politicians constantly trying to scare women about guns. Why do you think women are buying more guns?
Well, I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that, about a decade, maybe even 15 years ago, dads and moms started bringing their kids into hunter safety. And I think that was a really good gateway into shooting sports for them. And it's kind of the anything you can do, I can do better mentality with girls these days. I'm raising 2 girls, and they're very strong. And we see girls playing hockey. We see girls playing football. There is no stigma when it comes to shooting sports as well, which is fantastic. And I believe that, with the divorce rate going up, women staying single longer, just the whole empowerment of, again, anything guys can do, we can do better.
Right.
It just makes it less taboo for us to own our personal protection plan and take whatever steps necessary to keep ourselves safe.
Jenn, you've been a great guest. We really appreciate you coming on to talk about this very, very important issue. This has been another edition of IWF's Working for Women podcast. To those who listened, thank you for your time. Please visit IWF.org, where all issues are women's issues.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.